Okay, good evening everyone. So my name's Daryl and welcome. This is our first time in this new room. So if you remember, it used to be the library, but unfortunately people didn't read books anymore, so we decided to turn it into a training area, which I think is pretty cool. So tonight we're going through what's the course called?
True Meaning of Christmas.
There we go, the True Meaning of Christmas. And so the way we're going to structure it is we're going to have a bit of a discussion, and so this is our panel for tonight. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves, Jenna's on the far end there.
Yes, hello everyone, I'm Jenna. No, I was going to say I love Christmas, so I'm very happy to be here.
I'm Julia, and I also love Christmas.
All right.
I'm Angela.
All right, cool. So the way it's going to work is we're going to run through the video. We're going to check it out, see what the guys to say. It's very good. We've edited it down to take away all the unnecessaries or what we thought was unnecessary. And then after that, we'll just sit and discuss it. At the same time, you're welcome to have tea and coffee whenever you feel like. There's no rule as to when you can and can't get up, so help yourselves. And if we're ready to go, we can start the movie. Real good? Yes, no, yes, no, yes. Excellent.
During Advent, we spend a lot of time preparing our Christmas list, making sure we get all the Christmas gifts and all the shopping done, and we do all the decorations. And I love all the decorations. And we know well how to decorate and adorn our homes for Christmas. But do we know how to prepare our hearts for Christmas? That's what we're going to talk about now. Advent is a season that is all about preparing us for another season, and that is Christmas. And so during our Advent, and if we're in the midst of it now, we really want to be focused on preparing for Christmas, and especially preparing our hearts. And that's why I'm excited about a new book that just came out called The True Meaning of Christmas by Dr. Michael Barber, who is a professor of scripture here at the Augustine Institute. And I love the subtitle of the book is The Birth of Jesus and the Origins of the Season. And I think that Dr. Barber does a great job of kind of lifting the veil behind so many of these customs that we have, whether it's the manger scene and certain things that we use for decorations and some of the habits and customs of Christmas and what really was the origin in our Christian tradition for them, so that we can get to the meaning, the deeper meaning of them.
Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, you stand in splendid beauty. Oh Christmas tree, you stand in splendid beauty.
One of my favorite Christmas customs is decorating the Christmas tree. It was a big deal in my family growing up. Every year, one of us children would get the honor of being hoisted up by my father to place the star at the top of the tree. The Christmas tree even has its own Christmas songs, right? Most famously, there is O Tannenbaum, a traditional German hymn that many people know today. It was written in the mid-19th century and has been translated into English. Where do we get Christmas trees from? Internet articles and popular books will tell you that the tree is borrowed from pre-Christian pagan traditions, a pre-Christian winter festival called Yule. Yule is apparently the term for a winter month. In fact, Christmas time today is still sometimes called Yule. Think of the song Deck the Halls. We there talk about trolling or singing a Yuletide carol, Yuletide hymn, meaning a Christmas song. The truth is, we know little for certain about what pre-Christian Yule festivals actually looked like and how they influenced the celebration of Christmas today. The problem is such traditions were associated with non-literate cultures, and so we lack firsthand documentation about what these celebrations looked like. While German nationalists of the 19th and 20th centuries found all sorts of ways to connect the Christmas tree to Germanic identity and these pre-Christian Germanic festivals, an approach that became especially popular, by the way, with the Nazis. More serious scholars today have studied the matter and will tell you that we really don't know much about what these pagan traditions look like. Historian David Pr.Tony shows that instead of tracing the Christmas tree back to these kinds of traditions, the custom is better established by going back to what people did in medieval Europe. Because many people were illiterate, plays were performed to help them become more familiar with the Bible stories. These plays were often presented on December 24th, which was celebrated as the Feast of Adam and Eve in various parts of Europe. Different guilds would sponsor these productions, raising the guild's profiles in their various communities. In these plays, trees played a prominent role. The tree could symbolize the story of the fall of Adam and Eve. In fact, an actor who played Adam would carry the tree through the streets. The tree would also be decorated with apples to symbolize the forbidden fruit. Yet the tree could also be used to symbolize the cross. In the New Testament, the cross is described as a tree. In addition, the tree would be decorated with wafers to symbolize the Eucharist. It seems these trees became more than just props. They were used to help advertise these plays, and they'd be displayed in public places as elaborate exhibitions. In 1419, for example, a baker's guild from Freiburg records a tree being set up in a hospital. And by the 1500s, we have evidence that suggests trees were being set up at homes and churches. The Christmas tree then can be seen as pointing us back to the biblical roots of Christmas. In the chorus of the traditional Christmas hymn, "O Come All Ye Faithful," we hear the words, "O come, let us adore him. O come, let us adore him. O come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord." That Jesus is called the Lord is appropriate. In Luke, this is what Jesus is called. The angel announces to the shepherds in the field, "For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord." It's from Luke 2:11. For the first Jewish readers of the gospel, however, this would have been recognized as a truly stunning announcement. Let me explain. The Greek word translated Lord, kurios, can simply mean king. Since Jesus is the Messiah, an individual many Jews understood as a royal figure, the title makes sense. Within Luke's gospel, however, the use of the term Lord in reference to Jesus seems to have an even greater significance, though. Ancient Jews recognized that the name of God was sacred. It was revealed to Moses at the burning bush. Later, one of the 10 Commandments explains, "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain." That's from Exodus 20, verse 7. Transliterated in the English letters, the Lord's name from Hebrew is composed of the consonants YHWH. Now, there are no vowels in ancient Hebrew. Out of reverence, it became customary for Jews to refrain from pronouncing the name of God. So instead of reading it out loud, the practice developed of saying the word Lord in place of the word YHWH. In Hebrew, the word Lord is Adonai. In Greek, it is kurios. English Bibles continue this tradition today. Instead of writing God's name out, we see Lord instead with all capital letters. Lord becomes a substitute then for the holy name of God. When Jesus is called Lord in the Gospel of Luke, it seems that it is this fuller meaning that's being evoked. Biblical scholar Jason Staples, for example, shows that in Luke 6, Jesus says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord?" in Greek, Kyrie, Kyrie, and not do what I tell you? Luke 6:46. In the Greek version of the Old Testament, the only person who is identified with that double Lord, Lord is the God of Israel. The expression stands in the place in the Hebrew Bible where God's name occurs with the expression Adonai, Adonai, and then YHWH. Another New Testament scholar, C. Cavan Rowe, highlights the scene from the beginning of the Gospel of Luke where Elizabeth greets Mary. Elizabeth is the mother of John the Baptist, and she greets Mary with these words, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And how is this granted to me that the mother of my Lord should come to me?" The mother of my Lord, she says. "Behold, when the sound of your greeting came to my ears, the babe in my womb leaped for joy, and blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment to what was spoken to her from the Lord." So here in just a few short verses, the Lord refers not only to the God of Israel, but to Jesus. Mary is the mother of my Lord. Calvin Rose says that this is therefore the most startling verse in the birth infancy narrative and perhaps in the entire gospel. Jesus isn't simply the royal Messiah. In him, we find nothing less than the coming of the God of Israel. Now, Luke never precisely defines how Jesus is both God, the Son of God, and fully human. That's developed by later church councils, but the revelation is nonetheless earth-shattering. God has come in the flesh. During the 4 weeks that lead up to Christmas, Christian tradition celebrates Advent, which is a term taken from the Latin word for coming, adventus. Just as Christ came in his nativity, the church looks forward to the coming of the Lord at the end of time, when he will judge the living and the dead. Advent, then, is not just a time of looking backwards, not just about looking back to Jesus' infancy, but it looks forward. The church practices penance, and we seek to prepare ourselves for the coming of the King.
O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie.
Most people know that the New Testament presents Jesus as being born in Bethlehem. Accounts of how this came to be are found in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. This element of the Nativity story has been forever immortalized in one of the most cherished Christmas carols of all time, O Little Town of Bethlehem. The song opens with a very beautifully poetic description of Jesus' birthplace. O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie, above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by. Bethlehem was not a major center of power in Jesus' day. It was a sleepy little town known more for its past than for anything else. It was the place where the great king of Israel's history, David, had been born. We go on to read in the Gospel of Luke about the circumstances of Jesus' nativity. Popular English Bible translations usually have it something like this. And Mary gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and she laid him in a manger, in Greek Ph.Tony, because there was no room for them in the inn. And the Greek word there is kataluma. It's important to look at that passage carefully. As I'm going to explain, it has often been misunderstood, and the common translation of the Greek word there contributes to that misreading. Now, I want to clarify, I'm not interested in myth-busting here, just for the sake of myth-busting. As we will see, the bad translation causes us to miss an important element of the story that had vital significance for early Christian interpreters. And it's an element that I think has profound meaning for Christians today. So first, the Christ child is said to be born and laid in a manger. The Greek word there, Ph.Tony, probably means something like a feeding trough. Jesus is depicted as being placed where the food for the animals go. Second, in the translation I just gave, we read that there was no room for them in the inn. Now, this translation gives the misleading impression that there is some kind of Hotel Bethlehem and that there were no rooms available. But that's not correct. The word translated in Greek is kataluma. Now, later in the gospel, we read the famous story of the Good Samaritan. We read about how he helps some poor beaten man and he pays for his stay at an inn. But the word there is a different Greek word. The word that appears in the story of Jesus' birth, kataluma, is actually better translated room. This is the meaning the word has later in the gospel. So right before his Last Supper, Jesus sends his apostles, Peter and John, into Jerusalem ahead of the rest of his entourage to prepare for the Passover. Jesus tells them that they will go and find a room. And the Greek word there is kataluma, same word as in the Christmas story. It's the place where they are going to prepare the Passover meal. So in the story of Jesus' birth, he's laid in the manger because I think it's better to say, there was no space for them or no place for them in the room, in the kataluma. This is really significant, right? later, Jesus will be in a kataluma at Passover. He will be in the upper room. And there he does something that will forever affect the church's worship. He takes the bread and he says, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Luke 22:19. In his nativity, Jesus is placed where the food goes, in a manger. He's in the manger because he can't be in a room, in the kataluma. Later, when he's in the upper room, Jesus makes clear what was hinted at in the infancy story. He has come to be our food. So church fathers like Gregory the Great made much, should I say, of this, right? They pointed out that Bethlehem literally means house of bread. Beth meaning house, lechem meaning bread. And so they saw the manger as a pointer to the mystery of the Eucharist. What happens in the Eucharist is a kind of extension of the mystery of the Nativity. In the Eucharist, Christ comes to us as food. In the 400s, Cyril of Alexandria would therefore say, "Whereas we were brutish in soul, by now approaching the manger, yes, his table, we find no longer feed, but the bread from heaven, which is the body of life." People often warn about taking Christ out of Christmas, but the word Christmas also has another term in it, Mass. In the Mass, in the celebration of the Eucharist, we return to the manger. The church understands that the mystery of Christ's coming is made present once again in the liturgy, where Christ comes to us in the bread of life and in the cup. It's frequently said that the most beloved Christmas hymn of all is Silent Night. Its original German lyrics were written in 1818 by Joseph Mohr, an Austrian Catholic priest. John Freeman Young is responsible for the English translation of it. There we sang, "Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. Round yon virgin, mother and child," and so on and so forth. Now these words are beautiful and have endured the test of time. They never fail to capture our hearts and our minds. And yet, what do the words mean? What does round yon virgin mean? Yon is actually short for yonder. It means something like over there. And the rest of the words are meant to say that around Christ and Mary, there is both peace, all is calm, and the light of glory, all is bright. But why is it important that Jesus is born of a virgin at all? Christian tradition recognizes that Mary's virginity points to something special. What is it? Well, first of all, it highlights a key aspect of Jesus' identity. He has no human father. He is the Son of God in an utterly unique and special way. He is, as we've seen, the Lord. In Matthew, this is also a term that likely refers to his divinity. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus uses that expression, Lord, Lord, which, as biblical scholar Jason Staples shows, is reserved for the God of Israel in the Greek version of the Old Testament. Furthermore, at the end of the gospel, Jesus tells his disciples to go out to all nations and baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. New Testament scholar John Meyer explains, one could hardly imagine a more forceful proclamation of Christ's divinity and, incidentally, of the Spirit's distinct personality than this listing together on a level of equality of Father, Son, and Spirit. He points out that one doesn't baptize a person in the name of a divine person, a holy creature, and an impersonal force. In the end, then, Matthew shows us that the promise of Emmanuel, God with us, is realized in its truest sense in Jesus. In fact, in the Greek version of the Old Testament, the mother of the Emmanuel child is actually said to be a virgin. So it's appropriate in Matthew's narrative that the mother of that child is a virgin. Jesus is God with us. He represents the fullest meaning of this prophecy, and Mary is the Virgin Mother. In addition, as we've already seen, when Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, greets Mary, she greets Mary in the Gospel of Luke as the mother of my Lord. So Jesus' identity as divine as God with us is preserved in the virgin birth. But Mary's motherhood also reveals something else. It shows us that Jesus is truly human. The great fathers and doctors of the church love to highlight the fact that Jesus is born of a woman to refute those who claim that Jesus only appeared to be man. There were those who thought that God was opposed to the physical world. God wanted to keep his distance from the material world. Mary's virgin motherhood was proof for the early church fathers that God does not disdain the physical world. In fact, God becomes man. Jesus can suffer. He can die. He takes on the weaknesses and limitations of human nature. Jesus doesn't just beam down to earth as in some kind of science fiction story. He's flesh and blood. He's born of a human woman. So Jesus is fully God and fully man in Christian tradition, and this is seen as encapsulated in the idea of the virgin birth. At Christmas time, angels are everywhere, whether it be costumed children in pageants or on greeting cards or on decorations. It seems everywhere you turn, you're going to find an angel, right? Many of the most common Christmas carols refer to them as well. Angels we have heard on high. Hark, the herald angels sing. For anyone familiar with the New Testament accounts of Jesus' birth, the use of angel imagery at Christmas makes perfect sense. The announcement of the Messiah's birth first comes through angels. The well-known scene is reported in the Gospel of Luke. Now in that same region, there were shepherds out in the field keeping watch over their flock by night, and an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone round them. The angels go on to announce to shepherds Jesus' birth. And after this, we read, and suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, and peace on earth to men with whom he is pleased. What is meant by a multitude of the heavenly host? The word in Greek here is stratia. It refers to armies. Here the shepherds are given a glimpse of the army of heaven. Here, these angels, these angelic troops, announce peace. Now that's significant. Gregory the Great in the 500s wanted to tease out why this is so important. And he observes that it was a heavenly being, a cherubim, who was placed to block humanity from the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve sinned. Remember, it was a cherubim with a flaming sword, kind of lightsaber in the garden, to keep humanity out. Now, in the story in the gospel, Gregory explains, the angels come announcing peace. He puts it this way. Before the Redeemer was born in the flesh, there was discord between us and the angels. Because through sin we had become strangers to God, the angels as God's subjects cut us off from their fellowship. Because if the King of heaven has taken unto himself the flesh of our earth, the angels from their heavenly heights no longer look down upon our infirmity. He says, now they are at peace with us, putting away the remembrance of ancient discord. Leo the Great makes a similar point in a homily he delivered in the 400s. He quotes from the letter to the Ephesians in the New Testament that declares that Christ is, quote, our peace, Ephesians 2:14. And Leo declares the birthday of the Lord is the birthday of peace. Despite whatever strife we find in the world, in Christ we are assured of peace. As Jesus tells his disciples in the Gospel of John, I have said these things to you so that you may have peace in me. In the world you have tribulation, but have courage. I have overcome the world. In the church's worship, the peace and joy of heaven is also made present in a special way. Of course, there is not peace in a worldly sense, not peace based on emotions. The peace of Christ runs deeper. It's a peace that flows from the recognition that the manger points us to the Eucharist, where the Lord is present to his people. Every Eucharistic celebration is a kind of little Christmas then. And for this reason, the Sunday liturgy of the church is marked by the singing of the very hymn sung by the angels. We say, Glory to God in the highest. With the ears of faith, the church understands that the angelic song that was heard by the shepherds is now proclaimed once again. We join in the song of the angels, we're to understand. Heaven and earth come together, the priest says, we sing with all the angels in heaven, the Gloria, the Holy, Holy, Holies, and other angelic hymns.
Away in a manger, no
My most cherished Christmas memories is unpacking our family's manger set with my father each Christmas. Most people are familiar with the custom of erecting a crèche. And how did we get the practice of setting up nativity scenes? It all goes back to Francis of Assisi, actually. In 1223, Francis decided it was necessary to highlight the poverty of the infant Jesus. So he placed a statue of Christ in a manger with hay. He also included an ox and a donkey. As one historian puts it, there is no reason to doubt the historicity of the crèche. Francis's idea soon gained popularity. Today, the tradition of setting up a depiction of Jesus' birth is pretty commonplace. But why an ox and a donkey? The Gospels say nothing of these animals being present at Jesus' birth, so why did Francis include them? In the Greek version of the Old Testament, we read the following in the first chapter of Isaiah. The ox knows its owner, and the donkey knows the manger, Ph.Tony, of its Lord, Kurios in Greek. But Israel has not known me. Ancient Christian writers connected this passage with Luke's account, where Jesus, the Lord, Kurios, is laid in a manger, Ph.Tony. Reading the Old Testament in the light of the New Testament, ancient Christian writers believed Isaiah's prophecy about the ox and the donkey was pointing forward to the story of Jesus' birth. So in a homily dated sometime between 394 and 413, Jerome, the great Bible scholar of the early church, says, why a manger? That the prophecy of Isaiah might be fulfilled. Indeed, other Christian practices are likewise anchored in such readings of the Old Testament. For example, have you ever wondered how the tradition of midnight mass emerged? I mean, really, do we have to do this at midnight? The Gospel of Luke tells us that when Jesus was born, shepherds were in the field and they were watching their flock by night. But it never tells us the exact time Jesus was born. It doesn't say midnight. It seems the custom of midnight mass can be traced back to John Chrysostom's reading of the Old Testament book of Wisdom. There we read this following passage. For while gentle silence enveloped all things, and night in its swift course was now half gone, your all-powerful word leaped from heaven, from the royal throne, into the midst of the land that was doomed. That's Wisdom 18, 14 through 15. The Nativity marked the occasion for Chrysostom when this passage was fulfilled. God's all-powerful word leaped from heaven. Now, Wisdom says that this took place when night was, quote, half gone, end quote. So it was fitting to link Jesus' birth to midnight. Once again, to understand Christmas, we have to return to the Bible. And the more we study the Bible, the better I think we'll be able to enter in to the Christmas celebration. In the famous Christmas carol, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, we find the lines, Hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace, Hail the Son, spelled S-U-N, of righteousness. Why is Jesus identified as the Son? In fact, here we have a tradition that relates to the way Christmas ended up falling on December 25th. The New Testament frequently connects light and sun imagery to Christ. In Luke, Zechariah speaks of Christ's work of redemption as the dawn from on high. And in the Gospel of John, Jesus announces, I am the light of the world. Also in the book of Revelation, we find a vision where Jesus' face is said to be, quote, like the sun shining at full strength, end quote. Given these passages connecting Jesus to the Son, the early Christians found a reference to Christ in a prophecy found in the Old Testament book of Malachi. There we read, but for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, shall rise with healing in its wings, Malachi 4:2. Early Christian writers like Clement of Alexandria and Origen believed that Malachi's reference to the Son of Righteousness could be seen as a reference to Christ. This influenced Christian thinking about when Jesus was conceived. Let me explain. Following the New Testament, early church fathers saw in the coming of Christ the fulfillment of Jewish hopes for a new creation. You see that in the book of Isaiah, for example. By the 2nd century, we know that writers like Julius Africanus understood that creation occurred in connection with the spring equinox, which was fixed to March 25th. Why did they think that? Well, because Genesis tells us that when God created the sun, moon, and stars, he did so to separate the day and the night. The sun, moon, and stars separate the day and the night. And so these writers assume that when God separated the day and the night, a God of order would do that in an even way, right? Cut the day and the night evenly. The spring equinox marks the time of the year when daytime and nighttime are of equal length. And so writers like Julius Africanus assumed that God had created the sun originally on the equinox, on what was then March 25th. It was only natural then to connect the conception of Jesus with this date because he is the Son, S-U-N, of the new creation. So as the Son of the old creation began its life, so to speak, on March 25th, the Son of the new creation began his human life on the same date. Of course, much more could be said about this, but the main point here is that if Jesus' conception took place on March 25th, the implication would be that he'd be born 9 months later, that is December 25th. Now, it's not 100% sure that we got the March 25th date first, but December 25th was also a symbolic day. On the old Roman calendar, it marked the winter solstice, the day after which the sunlight begins to grow. So Jesus' birth could once again be nicely coordinated with this date. It marked the date when the Son of Righteousness, Christ, begins his earthly life. There are lots of details here I wish I had time to discuss, and I don't have time in this short video. To put it simply, people today often talk about the war on Christmas. What is often forgotten is that it was the Christians who actually fired the first volley in that conflict. Christians took a day that was recognized as having great cosmic significance and claimed it for Christ. Their point was clear. The world finds its true meaning in the God of the Bible. Now, this was a bold claim, and that there would be a battle around the time we celebrate Christmas about what is the meaning of the season. That was sort of baked into the Christmas celebration from the beginning because Christians had decided to celebrate the Nativity on a day that had great cosmic significance. Christmas was meant to show that the world finds its meaning in the Bible. Now, we know that this was confusing for some people. In the 400s, Leo the Great speaks worriedly about how some Christians were still paying homage to the sun on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And there's still confusion about the relationship of pagan traditions and the Christmas celebration today. But to make the point that the world finds its true sense in Jesus, that was going to shake things up. And it was going to be a bold claim. The church announces to the world that the new creation has arrived in Christ. We three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we traverse afar, field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star. So go the first few lines of the classic carol, We Three Kings. Yet nowhere in Matthew's gospel where we read about the Magi are they ever actually called kings, nor are they ever said to come riding on camels. How did the Magi become kings who arrive on camelback? First, let's go back to the Gospel of Matthew where we read the story. According to the gospel, the Magi come from the east after having seen the star, which we discussed in the last video. In addition, we're told that the Magi come bearing gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We're never told how many magi there are, but later Christian sources would often assume that there were 3 of them because there were 3 gifts. This is not unanimous, however. There's an ancient Syriac work, for example, called The Revelation of the Magi, which indicates that there were 12 different magi. Moreover, early church writers like Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, Origen thought that the gifts could be seen as having symbolic value, pointing to different aspects of Christ's identity. The gold points to Jesus' royal identity. The frankincense, or just incense, signifies his divinity because you offer incense in worship. And the myrrh was seen as anticipating his death. Ancient Christian writers, as well as even contemporary biblical scholars, also see allusions to Old Testament prophecies in the story of the Magi. For example, in Isaiah, we read about what will happen in the future day of Israel's deliverance. We're told, "A multitude of camels shall cover you. The young male camels of Midian and Ephah," we read. "All those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord." And it goes on to talk about how sons of a foreign country shall build up your walls and their king shall minister to you, that men may bring to you the wealth of the nations with their kings led in procession. It's from Isaiah 60, verse 6 and 10 and 11. Now, since the gifts of gold and frankincense are in Isaiah, and they come with kings and camels, Isaiah's oracles were merged with Matthew's story of the Magi bringing gold and frankincense. Moreover, the tradition that we have of depicting the Magi coming on camels, it's related to this. The reason we have nativity sets that indicate that the Magi look like the figures in Isaiah is to testify to the idea that this is a prophecy that is fulfilled in Christ. Another important passage that was connected with the story of the Nativity is Psalm 72. Here the psalmist talks about how foreign kings will come and bring gifts to the Son of David. The version of the psalm in the Greek version of the Old Testament contains a lot of parallels with Matthew's narrative. We read, "Kings of Tarsus and of the isles will offer gifts. Kings of Arabs and of Sheba will supply gifts. And all the kings will worship him. All the nations will serve him." Psalm 72. This psalm was easily interpreted as a prophecy about Jesus, who's clearly presented as the son of David in Matthew. So just as the nations worship the king, the son of David in Psalm 72, so the Magi worship Jesus in Matthew's gospel. And there are all kinds of connections between Psalm 72 and Matthew's depiction of the Magi. Go on and talk about others. But the Magi are typically understood in Christian tradition as pointing forward to the church's mission to the Gentiles, which is announced at the end of the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus tells the disciples there, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." In fact, the Magi come searching for the King of the Jews. Now, Jews would have likely used a different expression, the King of Israel. And you see this in the Passion narrative later in Matthew. The Jewish bystanders at the cross refer to Jesus as the King of Israel, but the Romans write the King of the Jews. And so it seems like the Magi are Gentiles. In addition, the story of the Magi concludes with the story of the slaughter of the innocent children at Bethlehem at the hands of the wicked King Herod. Here we see that the coming of the Messiah will also usher in suffering, because not all will accept him. I want to thank you for watching these videos that we've been presenting here on the Christmas season. Hope you've enjoyed them. Hope you have a very wonderful Epiphany. Until next time, one more time, Merry Christmas.
Right, so just before we get into the actual discussion, I've just got to say that my mother and mother-in-law are here tonight, so I've got to behave and make sure I don't say anything that's probably slightly offensive, or anyway, we'll see what happens there. But that being said, every year my mother and her friend Judy Worth, some of you might know her, phone Cresta Shopping Centre. And the reason they phone Cresta is to complain about the decorations not having a nativity scene in. So I'm sure you've probably seen it in most most shopping centres and whatnot, that the religious part, although it's such a fundamental part of the whole season, is falling out and falling away. So let's go to our panel. What stood out for you in this video? What made sense to you as this whole celebration unfolds?
Okay, I'll go first. I've watched this 3 times now, so I can go backwards. No, I think the thing that stood out the most for me was one line, I don't know the exact words, but how Jesus was put in a manger, which was the food for the animals, and then he became our food. I think that really stood out for me, as how Dr. Michael Barber went back from like how the Old Testament relates to the New Testament and how it all relates all together. And I think that's a very different way of looking at Christmas, because I know Christmas as, oh, Christmas, you know, Jesus' birth, the 3 wise men, the kings, you know, the angels. I didn't actually see it as part of the Bible in that sense. So that was one of the big things that stood out for me, was that Jesus was the food almost, and now he became our food. That was what stood out for me.
Well, I think, I mean, you're right there, as you say, how it all, the one leads to the other. So the Gospels are pretty much the fulfillment of the prophecies from various parts of the Old Testament, which is quite interesting. I know, Jenny, you spoke the other day when we were going through these videos about the donkey part. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I don't know, I just thought it was interesting, the ox and the donkey. I think it's, you know, it's not something that most people think of Christmas. You know, the ox and the donkey is not a very Christmassy thing to... That's not the first thing that comes to a person's mind, is Christmas. So when I was watching these videos and the ox and the donkey came out, I thought it was quite different. I never thought of it like that before. And then, as Daryl mentioned, is that also relates to Palm Sunday, when Jesus came on the donkey. So having it a part of the nativity scene, I think is very, yeah, like it says, the prophecies are being fulfilled. And yeah, I just thought... It's different, because I don't normally see the ox and the donkey. Even I think in the normal nativity scenes, it's not really there, the ox and the donkey. So yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting. So let's open the discussion into whoever's here. Tell us about your experience of Christmas from a religious or non-religious aspect, especially with family who do not buy into the whole spiritual side of it. What are your thoughts around that? Don't all shout at once. A tricky question, because it can be sensitive as well, I suppose. Yeah.
What did you say?
I was asking about how Christmas is in families and how it relates to the church aspect of it.
No idea.
You have no idea?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, well, I'll go. Oh.
Everybody likes presents.
Yeah?
So that's the main thing I find is, doesn't matter who people are through the year, they always want a present.
That is true. So, as my daughter sticks this on my head, yesterday my wife bought me a Grinch shirt. For obvious reason. I'm not a fan of all this sort of stuff, but anyway, it is what it is. Hey, thanks, Morgan. So, yeah, no, you're right. People do like getting presents. Where do presents come into it? What is the gift giving and stuff? Where does that come into the whole Christmas aspect?
So, I'm going to comment on the donkey too. So, because Mary rode on the donkey too. So he came into life being carried by a donkey and went to end of life being carried by a donkey. So yes, so the donkey's always, we've got one which has it. A present would be, Jesus got offered presents. So the kings came with their gifts for their Lord. And to me, I said earlier on, my family don't get gifts unless they've been to church. And I don't care that I've got an agnostic or two in my household, and a Methodist and a Catholic and etc. You go to church because that's what today is. Christmas Day is celebrate God and then celebrate us as a family. We are family, we're friends, we're connections. First and foremost, remember, God is with us. And then you can celebrate and do whatever. So to me, the gifts are the gifts as a family, because God, our Jesus, who was given to us as a gift, was given gifts for being born. That's the gifts.
It's a difficult one, and I highly respect that, because there must be, depending on how old the people are you're talking about, the agnostics and whatnot.
Adults.
All adults. Okay, so it must be really hard to implement that without without them going, oh, come on, this nonsense again, type thing. So I really respect that. That is really difficult.
I kind of don't really care with the rolling eyes or whatever. you're going to come to church, you're going to sit and listen, and when you go home, whatever you want to do is your story. That hour and a half is time. You can go to midnight mass, you can go Sunday morning.
Do they have to sign like a register to say that they've been there and get the priest to sign?
So adults still living at home. So I've got a 19-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a husband.
So it could be all seen as children, I suppose, in some sort of way. I speak for myself. All right, no, excellent. I really respect it. Like I said, I think that's really difficult. So from this church aspect, how much time do you think throughout the day, the Christmas day, should you place on prayer, on call it religious stuff throughout the Christmas celebration, or should it just be mass and then party goes on?
Well, for my family, it's always like funny the difference between Easter and Christmas. Like I know Easter is like I suppose more important one, but the comparison with the religious aspect, Easter, the whole weekend we are at church. Our neighbours see us walking up and down. And then Christmas is kind of like, I'm amazed, like it's kind of the same Sunday Mass with a bit of, I don't know, tinsel here and there, but like it's an hour Mass, you go on a Sunday or midnight Mass, and then you come home. So for me, like, we say grace and everything during the day, but I think more could be placed on the like prayer aspect.
No, fair point. I don't think it's definitely not as important as Easter, in my opinion, anyway. But it's definitely more of a time for celebration. And I think as well, from my point of view, it becomes a healthy balance between too holy and not holy enough. So that's my perception. I could be wrong. Anyone's thoughts on that there? Should it be all in or half in or not?
I had in my early 20s, I had a bit of a reversion to the faith, and I saw the whole giving of gifts and all the commercial and materialistic aspect of Christmas as being completely taboo, and I thought, well, we need to get rid of this. And that was one of the most depressing Christmases we've ever had. Wow. And I think what you say about a balance is important, because I think we mustn't lose the sense of celebration. And the external things, frivolous as they may be, help us. We are material beings, and we need that to aid us in celebration. But we mustn't err on the side of celebrating, being merry, and losing the spirituality. We need to integrate both.
That's a very good point. I've actually got some friends who are from some hardcore Christian non-Catholic church, and they pretty much do the same thing every Christmas. There's like nothing. There's no presents, there's no trees, there's nothing. And it's, I question them saying, do you not mark the occasion? And they say, yeah, we pray. So like, okay, that's nice and it's good, but is there no celebration around the occasion? Because surely this is the time that Christ came to earth for us, And I said, what is your Easter like? And he said, same thing, no Easter eggs, no nothing. And I was like, there's a human aspect, and as you say, we are material. And in that sense, it's why churches are built like they are. Because you walk in there, so you go, wow, there's a sense of awe to it, and you've got to see that. Otherwise, it's just walk into another room and, do what you do.
I think also on that is like when I was little, and even looking at my little cousins and everything, is Christmas is more, always for me, was more for the kids and like presents and big celebrations and stuff. And as I've got older and obviously, got more into the religious side of Christmas, not the more fun side of it, I think it has become a little bit more depressing and not as exciting. But I think it's also the way we look at it, because last year I was like that, and this year I've got a completely different look at it. Like, okay, it's not all about that. There's still celebration in the religious side of stuff. And I think that's what we need to do. And also like watching the videos now is why we use a Christmas tree and why we sing the carols that we do and all the meanings behind the materialistic things, why we give presents. Like there's religious meanings behind that. And I think if we can look at that and understand that, there's still going to be the religious side of things in the big celebrations.
Also for me, what really means a lot is Damien's mom wrote an Advent story literally every day leading right up until Christmas Eve. But it's all from the point of the Magi's point of view and what they got up to, and then you see a bit of Mary and Joseph. But we read that story every year until the kids got to about 11. And then they said, look, this, we know this now, we know it pretty well. I mean, they still like it from a nostalgic point of view. But what I do like and what's important for me is every evening we do still light the Advent candle on a wreath, and then we sing a song for Advent. And then this year, we've got a completely different book. I don't know if anybody's read it, Bartholomew's Passage. I think it's the second series. There's actually four books for Advent. And last year we read Jotham's Journey, right up until Christmas Eve. And for me, it's sort of a combination. It's a celebration because you're getting excited about a story, but it's keeping you focused on the crib. And then each night, if the one story is a little bit about Mary and Joseph, then we'll move them a bit closer, and I don't know. To me, I like that combination.
It's amazing. It's almost illustrating the story. And I think, in setting up those traditions, whether it's a church tradition or a family tradition, there's actually value in that. But they're hard to maintain that because, as you say, some would get bored with it or whatever the case is. But there's definitely value in setting up and keeping those traditions alive that hopefully get passed down to the next generation. And I'll tell you why that's so important. I saw this video the other day about, it was a Catholic priest on YouTube saying, years ago, we used to say, oh, don't worry, when the youth leave the church, they'll eventually come back because, they've experienced church and whatnot, and they come back to something. The scary thing is now, because they haven't been trained, if you want to call it that, in the tradition of attending Mass on a Sunday basis, they've almost got nothing to come back to. So because they're completely out of it, it's like, well, if they're going through a tough time in life, what do? Who knows now? They hit the pub instead of coming to Mass or whatever the case is. So the risk is that without that traditional, or without the habit of being in some form of a traditional habit, if you want to call it that, there's nowhere to go back to if you do stray from it. I'd actually like to know your story there when you said you did stray from the church and came back. What brought you back? That's quite interesting.
Sure, no, that's whole other story. It was Our Lady of Medjugorje. I had just come out of the army and I was very rebellious. And I read a book that my mom gave me, and it hit me between the eyes. And so I had a huge reversion and started a youth group at our parish, and even joined the seminary for a few years. So.
Wow. But I met you after that.
That's brilliant.
Hence why we have a new youth group in the church.
And that being said, as far as that new element of the church and trying to get the youth back up again after COVID, Jen is pretty much taking over the youth and running that, so which is really good. So good for you.
They need it.
Yeah, they do need it. All right, so I think we're hitting just on 8 o'clock. So if there's anyone else who wants to chat about anything, let me know. Otherwise, there's tea and biscuits and coffee. You're welcome to hang around for a bit and chat. And if you're good, one last question though. Mom, have you phoned Cresta yet?
Wait until after Christmas. Then,
Phone afterwards when the dust is settled. All right, good.
I was just going to say, people often think, oh no, Christmas carols, not so early and all that. But actually, when you start listening to Christmas carols again, it's the story. Mm-hmm. So even like just listening to those first words and the first verses, I mean, that just brings Christmas home, those Christmas carols. So they actually are important to have every year. And then I agree with you about all the Christmas decorations and that. And I used to teach Sunday school here. And I remember reading the whole thing and teaching the little kids about the Christmas tree. And the whole Christmas tree has got like such meaning behind it. Like, I remember it was saying that it's pointing like almost arrows. The fir tree points up towards heaven. It's an evergreen to symbolize God being everlasting. And then all the decorations on the Christmas tree have actual meaning. Like the little candy canes are actually the shepherd's hooks. And the bells are, the angels and the heralding. And there, even the little gifts was symbolic of the gold and frankincense and myrrh. And it was, what other things do we put on the Christmas tree? But stars on the top, and the angels, and everything on the Christmas tree had a meaning. So for me now, like putting the Christmas tree up is actually so much more meaningful. So
It's interesting.
It is,
What's the tinsel for?
Oh, I don't know.
So my putting decorations up reminds me, I've got decorations from people. It's around the tree. And as you put it up, you remember someone, something, somewhere. It's just such a emotional, and you give thanks for every decoration up on that tree to go, oh, remember so and so gave me, they're not with us, or you know, I went there and I did. How lucky are we that you can put a tree up? Overseas they do happy holidays. We still have Christmas.
Yeah, true.
It's me is when they say Xmas.
Yeah.
It stands for.
To me, it kind of felt like taking Christ out and
What I also saw at, it's terrible now I'm showing that I watch soapies occasionally. But I also love there on Days of Our Lives, many, many years ago, they, on the Christmas tree, they have these little decorated balls with a person's name. So I think also not only remembering who gave you decorations, but it's thinking, and I think it's especially important if it's somebody that's passed away in your family as well, that you put their name on the tree, their name,
Yeah, so on that, we do that with the whole family, and my family's like really big, so the Christmas tree is filled with names. But just on the carols as well, is I think that's so important because personally for me, it's like we know all the carols, or I know all the carols, but I don't really know why we sing them. And going through this and editing all the songs and everything, I actually like listened to the words that were coming through. And was like, oh wow, it actually tells the whole Christmas story and the importance of Christmas. And I think that was, even at the carols the other night at down there, I was like, actually, like, that's why we sing it, not just singing it for the sake of singing it. So I think, the meaning behind everything is just really important.
And what's beautiful is that, you know, this meaning started from our church so many years ago and has carried through to all the different types of churches as well, and spilt out to the commercial side in some sense too, you know. So hopefully in some way, some seeds are planted there. There's some realization that can come from it.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak on that. I also know someone that doesn't celebrate Christmas at all. You know, no Christmas carols and nothing. And I was just thinking, and also the date, seemingly, I mean, he said it was of great cosmic significance, but it seemed, you know, they said, this friend said that, it's just a pagan date. But then it was revealed St. Faustina said, Jesus revealed to St. Faustina that Christmas is the day that Jesus lets most souls from purgatory into heaven. And I just thought, okay, he must approve of everything. He must approve of the celebration. He must approve of the date. He must approve of the carols.
And even the gifts, because that's
so that was just something.
Yeah, so I think all in all, there's pretty much no rule as long as Christ remains the center of it. And I think that's okay. Yeah, all right. I think we're going over time, 5 minutes, but that's okay, I suppose.
All right, say thank you very much for.
No, and thanks for attending. I know it's a crazy time of year as well. So thank you for joining us. So we're pretty much going to do this almost once a month or every 6 weeks or so with different topics and whatnot to just join in on it and invite your friends. Thank you. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the bell icon. You will be notified of future updates.